A young Irish immigrant arrives in New York with nothing but a worn dress and a heart full of hope. In the most opulent mansion on Fifth Avenue, she will serve tea to the city's most powerful, without knowing that one of them is about to risk everything for her. But when their forbidden love is discovered, a ruthless enemy will do anything to destroy them. This is the story of how true love defied the most rigid rules of New York high society. In the winter of 1893, as snow covered Manhattan streets like a blanket of silence, an uncomfortable truth shook the gilded halls of the elite. Love respects neither titles nor fortunes. Bridget O'Sullivan never imagined that crossing the ocean would lead her into the arms of New York's most coveted man. Nathaniel Ashford never planned to fall in love with a maid. But when two souls meet in the midst of the deepest social divide, the consequences can be devastating or gloriously liberating. Before discovering how this extraordinary story ends, I invite you to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of our passionate stories, and comment below where you're watching from. Now then, join me on this journey to the heart of America's Gilded Age. The port of New York received hundreds of desperate souls fleeing hunger and misery every day. Bridget O'Sullivan descended from the Irish steamer one grey November morning, clutching against her chest the only suitcase that contained her entire world. 2 dresses, a shawl knitted by her mother, and a rosary that had belonged to her grandmother. She was 23 years old, had eyes green as the fields of Connemara, and possessed an iron determination forged through years of deprivation. She didn't come alone in spirit. She carried with her the hopes of her entire family, who had scraped together every penny to buy her passage. Her father, broken by years of working land that would never be his, had whispered to her at farewell, "Be brave, child. In America they say even impossible dreams can come true." Bridget wasn't sure she believed in dreams, but she did believe in hard work. The employment agency for immigrants sent her directly to the Ashford residence, a limestone mansion that rose 5 stories above Fifth Avenue, directly across from Central Park. Mrs. Hendricks, the housekeeper, was an English woman with a severe face and military manners who inspected Bridget as if she were livestock at auction. "You speak English well, that's something," said the woman in a cutting tone. "But here we work with British standards, not Irish customs. You'll arrive at 5 in the morning, finish when I tell you, and never— are you listening? Never address the masters of the house unless they speak to you first." Bridget nodded, swallowing her pride. She had crossed an ocean. She could endure the humiliations of a pretentious housekeeper. The Ashford mansion was a universe of brutal contrasts. On the ground floor, servants moved like silent shadows through narrow hallways and low-ceilinged kitchens where the heat from the stoves was unbearable. Upstairs, in the main halls, ceilings rose to cathedral heights, decorated with Italian frescoes and crystal chandeliers worth more than Bridget would earn in her entire lifetime. During the first weeks, Bridget barely saw the family. She worked in the laundry, the damp basement where maids scrubbed Egyptian linen sheets until their hands bled. She shared a tiny attic room with 3 other girls: Mary, a German of few words; Sophie, a French girl who dreamed of being an actress; and Catherine, another Irish woman who had been in the house for 5 years. "Don't get attached to this place," Catherine warned her one night as they lay in their narrow cots. "The Ashfords are like all rich people. They use you until you wear out and then replace you without a second thought." But Bridget wasn't one to give up easily. She observed, learned, perfected every task. She discovered she had a natural talent for flower arrangement, something Mrs. Hendricks noticed when she reorganized a centerpiece that had been unbalanced. "You have an eye for aesthetics," the housekeeper admitted grudgingly. "Perhaps you can be useful upstairs after all." The promotion came in January. One of the personal maids fell ill with pneumonia, and Bridget was temporarily promoted to serve on the upper floors. That was when she saw him for the first time. Nathaniel Ashford was 35 years old and the personification of everything Bridget had imagined about American aristocracy. Tall, with an athletic build maintained through fencing and horseback riding, he possessed the angular face of his Dutch ancestors and a grey gaze that seemed to evaluate the value of things with mathematical precision. He had inherited his father's shipping empire and doubled it in 10 years, becoming one of the richest men on the eastern seaboard. Their first interaction was brief and formal. Bridget was carrying a tea tray to the library when he looked up from his documents. "Are you new?" he asked, without much interest. "Yes, sir. Bridget O'Sullivan, sir," she responded with practiced reverence. He nodded distractedly and returned to his papers. She existed to him as much as the furniture. But fate has curious ways of weaving its threads. 2 days later, while Bridget was cleaning the music room, she found a score that had fallen behind the piano. It was an Irish ballad, "The Last Rose of Summer," the same one her mother used to sing to her. Without thinking, she began humming the melody while arranging the scores. "You have a good voice," said a voice behind her. Bridget startled, dropping the scores. Nathaniel Ashford stood in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't interpret. "Forgive me, sir. I shouldn't have—" "It won't happen again," she hastened to say, kneeling to pick up the scattered papers. "Do you know that song?" he asked, approaching. "My mother used to sing it, sir. In Ireland." For the first time, Nathaniel really looked at her. He noticed the blush on her cheeks, the natural grace with which she moved despite her simple uniform, the bright intelligence in those green eyes. "Can you read music?" "No, sir. I only know the melody." He took the score from her hands. Their fingers brushed briefly, an electric contact that both pretended not to notice. "It's a beautiful piece," he said softly. "My mother also played it. She was from Boston but appreciated Celtic music." There was a strange silence charged with something unnameable. Then Nathaniel seemed to remember who he was, where he was, and the unbridgeable distance between them. "You may go," he said with a voice once again cold and formal. Bridget curtsied and left quickly, with her heart beating inexplicably. Life in the mansion followed its relentless rhythms. Bridget learned the names of frequent guests, the Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Morgans. She observed from the shadows how New York's elite gathered for 8-course dinners lasting 4 hours, where they talked of railroad investments, the opening of the new Metropolitan Opera, social scandals that ruined reputations. She also met Victoria Pemberton, the woman everyone assumed would become Mrs. Ashford. Daughter of a Pittsburgh steel magnate, Victoria was beautiful in the manner of Greek statues, cold, perfect, intimidating. She visited the mansion twice a week, always impeccably dressed, always with that calculated smile that didn't reach her blue eyes. "Mr. Ashford will marry her before summer," Catherine confided. "It's the perfect marriage, unites 2 fortunes and consolidates power. That's how this world works, Bridget. Love is a luxury only the poor can afford." But Bridget was beginning to notice things. The way Nathaniel tensed when Victoria entered the room. How their conversations sounded more like business negotiations than romantic courtship. The way his eyes wandered toward the windows as if seeking an escape. And she noticed something more disturbing. He sought her with his gaze. It happened during formal dinners, when she served wine or cleared plates, a fleeting glance quickly diverted. In the mornings, when she brought the newspaper to his study, an almost imperceptible pause in his reading when she entered. Bridget knew she should ignore it. She knew that entertaining any thought in that direction was not only imprudent, but dangerous. Maids who got involved with masters ended up in the street, pregnant and ruined. But the heart, that rebellious organ, doesn't understand prudence. The night that changed everything came in March. The Ashford family was hosting a spring ball, one of the most important social events of the season. The mansion transformed into a fairy tale palace, with exotic flowers imported from greenhouses, an orchestra of 20 musicians, and French champagne flowing like water. Bridget worked 18 hours straight, helping with preparations, serving guests, ensuring everything flowed smoothly. Near midnight, exhausted, she went out to the back garden to get some fresh air. The night was clear, unusually warm for the season. From there she could see the illuminated windows of the ballroom, the silhouettes of couples dancing to the rhythm of a Strauss waltz. She sat on a stone bench, removing for a moment the shoes that were destroying her feet. "I thought you were a spectre in the garden," said a voice she already recognized too well. Nathaniel emerged from the shadows, loosening his white tie. He looked overwhelmed, different from the impeccable host she had seen circulating among his guests. Bridget stood immediately, searching for her shoes. "Mr. Ashford, I only needed a moment. I'll return inside immediately." "No," he said firmly. "Stay. You also have the right to breathe fresh air." He sat on the bench without waiting for permission, a gesture that left her completely disconcerted. Masters didn't sit with maids. Masters didn't converse with maids in dark gardens. "Shouldn't you be dancing with Miss Pemberton?" she asked, not knowing where she got the audacity. He smiled bitterly. "I should be doing many things I'm not doing, and not doing things I shouldn't be doing." The silence between them vibrated with unspoken meanings. "Do you know what the problem is with having everything, Bridget?" he asked, using her name for the first time. "That none of it really belongs to you. This house, this name, these obligations. They're a gilded cage. Everyone expects me to marry Victoria, have 3 children, expand the business, die respected and forgotten. A perfectly planned life without a single moment of true choice." "At least it's a comfortable cage, sir," she responded softly. "Some of us live in cages without gold." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Bridget saw in his eyes something that both frightened and excited her, recognition, as if he saw in her a reflection of his own prison. "You're right, of course," he admitted. "Forgive my self-pity. It's indecent to complain about privileges you'll never know." "I didn't mean to offend you, sir." "You don't offend me. You remind me that I'm human, something I forget frequently in this circus of appearances." From the hall, the music changed to a slower, more melancholic piece. "Do you dance, Bridget?" he asked suddenly. She laughed, incredulous. "People of my class don't learn to dance waltzes, sir." "Then I'll teach you." And before she could protest, Nathaniel stood and offered his hand. She took it, feeling she was crossing an invisible but definitive line. There, in the dark garden, while music floated from the illuminated windows, Nathaniel Ashford taught an Irish maid to dance. He guided her clumsily at first, then with more confidence, until they moved together in a dance that had nothing to do with steps and everything to do with the rhythm of 2 hearts beating in unison. When the music ended, they remained motionless, too close, breathing the same air. Nathaniel raised his hand and gently caressed Bridget's cheek. "This is wrong," he whispered. "I know," she responded. "I could ruin you. I know. I should walk away." "You should." But neither moved. The world reduced to that garden, to that moment, to the dangerous promise of something that couldn't exist but had already taken root. A noise from the house separated them abruptly. Nathaniel stepped back, recomposing his mask of impassive master. "This didn't happen," he said with tense voice. "No, sir, it didn't happen." He returned to the ball. She remained in the garden, trembling not from cold, but from the terrible and wonderful certainty that her life had just changed forever. In the following weeks, both tried to maintain appropriate distance, but it was like trying to contain a tide with bare hands. They sought each other with their eyes in the hallways. They found excuses to be in the same room. Nathaniel began asking her to bring his morning coffee personally, a task that belonged to the butler. Bridget started staying longer than necessary when cleaning his study. They talked about everything and nothing. He asked her about Ireland, about her family, about her dreams. She asked him about the books he read, about his travels, about the weight of expectations. They discovered impossible affinities. Both loved Yeats's poetry, both found social conventions that imprisoned them ridiculous. Both longed for a freedom that seemed unattainable. "If you were free to choose," she asked him one April morning while organizing his desk, "what would you do with your life?" Nathaniel stopped writing and reflected at length. "I would travel, not to the approved destinations of the European Grand Tour, but to places that still hold mystery. Egypt, India, Japan. I'd meet ordinary people, not just aristocrats with empty titles. I'd build something with my own hands, something that had value beyond money." He paused. "And you?" "I'd have a small bookstore," she confessed, with a dreamy smile. "A place where common people could access books without being judged. And maybe I'd write stories about people like me who never appear in the elegant books of libraries like this one." "You would do it marvelously," he said with absolute conviction. Those stolen moments became the oxygen both breathed, but they couldn't last. In a house full of servants and social obligations, secrets have short lives. Mrs. Hendricks was the first to notice the prolonged glances, the fleeting smiles, the extra time Mr. Ashford spent in his study when Bridget was cleaning. With an eye trained to detect transgressions, she began to watch. And then they made a mistake. One rainy May afternoon, when all the servants were busy preparing dinner and the Ashford parents had gone out to an opera performance, Bridget found Nathaniel in the library, staring out the window with a tortured expression. "Is something wrong, sir?" she asked softly. He turned. In his eyes was a desperation she had never seen. "Victoria and her father are coming tomorrow. My mother has planned the formal announcement of our engagement for Saturday. Everything is decided. The marriage contract is already drafted." Bridget's world reeled. She knew this day would come, but hearing it aloud was like receiving a physical blow. "Congratulations, sir," she managed to say, though the words tasted like ash. "No," he said fiercely. "Don't congratulate me for chaining myself to a life without love, without passion, without you." And then he crossed the room and kissed her. It was a desperate, hungry kiss, full of everything they couldn't say. Bridget responded without thinking, abandoning herself to the glorious madness of the moment. Her hands tangled in his hair, her back against the leather-bound books, the entire world disappearing except for the undeniable truth that they loved each other. They didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. They didn't see the door open. "Good heavens!" exclaimed Mrs. Hendricks. They separated abruptly. The housekeeper looked at them with a mixture of horror and triumph. Behind her, two maids watched with wide eyes. "Mr. Ashford," the woman said in an icy voice, "this is unforgivable." Nathaniel recovered his composure with effort. "Mrs. Hendricks, this is none of your business. When a maid seduces the family son, it is absolutely my business. This woman will be dismissed immediately and without references, and I will seriously consider informing the police about her immoral conduct." "She didn't seduce me!" Nathaniel exploded. "I was the one who—" "Nathaniel, what is happening here?" asked a cold voice from the hallway. Eleanor Ashford, matriarch of the family, entered the library with the authority of a queen. At 60 years old, she was a formidable woman who had built her social power with the precision of a military strategist. Mrs. Hendricks hastened to explain what she had witnessed, adding details and implications that turned a kiss into a scandal of epic proportions. Eleanor listened in silence, her face an impenetrable mask. When the housekeeper finished, she turned to her son. "Is it true?" Nathaniel met his mother's gaze. "Yes, I see." Eleanor evaluated Bridget from head to toe. "Girl, gather your belongings. You have 1 hour to leave this house." "Mother, you can't." "I can and I will. This situation ends now, Nathaniel. You have obligations, an imminent engagement, a name to protect. I will not allow an adventure with the help to ruin everything this family has worked for over generations. Bridget found her voice, though it trembled. Mrs. Ashford, I take full responsibility. Mr. Ashford did nothing. Silence, Eleanor ordered. You don't have permission to speak. Mrs. Hendricks, ensure this woman leaves immediately, and that she be provided with no references of any kind. Nathaniel, you and I will have a conversation in my study. Now. Mother and son left the library. Bridget remained motionless, destroyed, while Mrs. Hendricks smiled with barely contained satisfaction. I knew something like this would happen, said the housekeeper. You Irish women, always looking to climb above your station. Gather your things, and if you're pregnant, don't expect help from this family. Bridget climbed to the attic in a state of shock. Catherine helped her pack her meager belongings, murmuring words of comfort that didn't penetrate the numbness. As she descended the service stairs for the last time, with her suitcase in hand and her heart broken, she passed by the study where Nathaniel was arguing heatedly with his mother. Voices filtered through the oak door. You can't dictate to me whom I can or cannot love. Love, Eleanor laughed bitterly. How romantic, how pathetically naive. Love doesn't pay debts, Nathaniel. Love doesn't maintain empires. You will marry Victoria, produce heirs, and forget this Irish maid ever existed. Bridget didn't wait to hear more. She walked out into the New York night with $50 of accumulated salary and a heart that would never be the same again. The city that had seemed full of promise now revealed itself in all its cruelty. Without references, finding another decent job was impossible. Employment agencies closed their doors to her as soon as she mentioned she had worked for the Ashfords but had no letter of recommendation. You did something wrong, they told her with accusing eyes. We don't hire women with questionable reputations here. The money was running out. Bridget had to move from the respectable boarding house to increasingly cheaper rooms in increasingly dangerous neighborhoods. Hunger became her constant companion, and then, when she thought she had hit rock bottom, she discovered something that would change everything again. She was pregnant. Doctor. Murphy looked at her over his glasses with a serious expression. Approximately 2 months, I'd say. Is the father in the picture? Bridget shook her head, unable to speak. The charity clinic in the Lower East Side smelled of disinfectant and desperation. In the waiting room were other women, with stories probably as tragic as hers. Listen, girl, the doctor said more kindly, you have options. I know certain people who can resolve this problem. It's not legal, it's not safe, but it's an option. No, Bridget said firmly, I can't do that. The doctor sighed. Then you need a plan. A single pregnant woman doesn't survive long in this city without help. Do you have family? In Ireland. I can't go back like this. It would kill them with shame. There are homes for unwed mothers. They'll give you shelter and food in exchange for work. After the birth, the baby will be given up for adoption. Nice! The idea of giving up her child tore at her, but what alternative did she have? She couldn't raise a child alone, without income, without support, without a future. She left the clinic in a dazed state. The streets of the Lower East Side teemed with immigrant life. Italians, Jews, Poles, Irish, all crowded into apartment buildings that rose like human hives. Barefoot children played among the garbage. Women shouted from windows. The smell of boiled cabbage, damp clothes, and overflowing sewers was omnipresent. This was New York without the gilded veneer of Fifth Avenue. This was reality for most. Bridget walked aimlessly, trying to process her new reality. She was pregnant with Nathaniel Ashford's child, a man who was probably already engaged to Victoria Pemberton, a man who belonged to a world so distant it might as well be on another planet. Would he even care? Did she have the right to tell him? While she reflected, she didn't notice the man following her until it was too late. A hand grabbed her arm, dragging her into an alley. Panic flooded her. "Your wallet, quick!" the assailant growled, showing a rusty knife. Bridget handed him the small purse with her last $20. The man took it and fled running. She slumped against the alley wall, finally sobbing all the tears she had held back for weeks. "My God, are you all right?" asked a female voice. A woman of about 40, dressed simply but with dignity, knelt beside her. She had a kind face and dark eyes full of genuine compassion. "They robbed me, all my money," Bridget managed to say between sobs. "Damned thieves infest these streets. Come, get up. You can't stay here. I'll take you to a safe place." The woman, who introduced herself as Rosa Martinez, led her to a small bakery on the corner of Mulberry Street. The place was humble but clean, with the smell of fresh bread and spices that made Bridget's stomach growl with hunger. "Sit," Rosa ordered, gently pushing her toward a chair. "My husband Tomas and I have this business. It's not much, but honestly earned." She appeared with a plate of soup and freshly baked bread. Bridget devoured the food while Rosa watched with maternal satisfaction. "How long has it been since you ate properly?" 2, maybe 3 days. Rosa clicked her tongue. "You're too young and pretty to be on the streets alone. Do you have family here?" Bridget shook her head and then, not knowing why, she told her everything. Perhaps it was Rosa's kindness, or maybe the desperation of having no one else to talk to. But the words came out like a torrent. Her work at the Ashford mansion, the impossible love with Nathaniel, the humiliating dismissal, and now the pregnancy. Rosa listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally. When Bridget finished, exhausted from the confession, the woman remained thoughtful. "That man, the baby's father, do you love him?" "With every fiber of my being. But that doesn't change anything. He'll marry a woman of his class, and I'll raise his child in poverty or give him up forever." "Does he know about the pregnancy?" "No, and he can't know. What good would it do? It would only put him in an impossible position." Rosa leaned forward. "Listen to me, girl. I'm Spanish, came here 20 years ago with nothing. Tomas was an Italian immigrant just as poor. When we met, our families opposed it. Spanish and Italians didn't mix, they said. But we loved each other. We eloped, married, and built this life together. It's not a life of luxury, but it's ours. It's different. You were the same class. Love always finds obstacles, Bridget. The question is, are you going to give up without fighting? That man has the right to know he'll be a father. He has the right to choose if he wants to be part of his child's life. And you have the right to fight for the love you found. It's an impossible dream. All dreams are impossible until someone makes them reality. Rosa offered her work and a room. We don't pay much, but you'll have a roof, food, and a safe place for the baby when it's born. In exchange, you'll help in the bakery. Deal? Bridget accepted, overwhelmed by the generosity of this stranger who had become a guardian angel. The next 2 months were of hard but healing work. Bridget learned to make bread, to decorate cakes, to serve customers. Rosa and Thomas treated her like family. In the Lower East Side neighborhood, where everyone was an immigrant struggling to survive, no one judged a pregnant woman without a wedding ring. But every night, alone in her small room above the bakery, Bridget thought of Nathaniel. Was he married already? Had he forgotten her? Did he ever look out his mansion window and wonder where she was? One July afternoon, while working at the counter, an unusual customer entered. A well-dressed man, clearly out of place in that humble neighborhood, ordered bread with an accent that betrayed expensive education. "Miss O'Sullivan?" he asked suddenly. Bridget looked at him surprised. "Do we know each other?" "I'm James Whitmore, attorney. I represent a certain client who prefers to remain anonymous. I've been looking for you for weeks." Bridget's heart raced. "I don't know what you're talking about. My client wishes to ensure you're well. He asked me to give you this." He took a thick envelope from his briefcase. Inside were $500 in clean bills and a note in handwriting she would recognize anywhere. "I cannot live without knowing you're safe. Please accept this. It's not charity. It's a debt of the heart. N." Tears sprang to her eyes. He had looked for her. He hadn't forgotten her. Tell him I don't need his money," Bridget said, pushing the envelope back. "He imagined you'd say that. That's why he asked me to tell you the following. If you won't accept it for yourself, accept it for those who might need help in the future. Use the money to do the good I cannot do, trapped in my gilded cage." Bridget held the envelope, understanding the message. Nathaniel had found a way to care for her without compromising her further. "How is he?" she asked quietly. The attorney hesitated. "Honestly, Miss O'Sullivan, I've never seen him so miserable. He married Miss Pemberton 3 weeks ago in a ceremony that seemed more like a funeral than a wedding. He fulfills his social obligations like an automaton, but he's broken." Bridget's world stopped. Married. The word fell like a marble slab on her secret hopes. "Thank you for the information, Mr. Whitmore, and for the money. I'll use it wisely." The attorney nodded. "May I tell him something from you?" Bridget thought at length. She could tell him about the baby. She could ask him to rescue her. She could unleash a storm that would destroy his marriage before it began. But she wouldn't. She wouldn't turn their love into the cause of his unhappiness or scandal. "Tell him I'm well, and that I release him from any obligation toward me, that he be happy if he can. That's all." The attorney seemed surprised. "Are you sure? He would pay any amount to—" "I'm sure. Goodbye, Mr. Whitmore." When the attorney left, Bridget allowed herself to cry for a moment. Then she dried her tears, put away the money, and returned to work. That night, she told Rosa about the attorney's visit, omitting only the detail of the pregnancy. "So he's married," Rosa said thoughtfully. "But he still loves you. That money isn't guilt, it's love. Love isn't enough when worlds are so different. Maybe you're underestimating the power of love to change worlds." A week later, while Bridget was organizing inventory in the back storeroom, she heard agitated voices in the shop. She came out to find Rosa arguing with a threatening-looking man. "I told you they have until the end of the month to pay, or this place closes," the man said in a hard voice. "Mr. Castellano, please. We'll pay you. We just need a little more time," Rosa pleaded. "Time's up. Either you pay $5,000 in back rent or I throw you out and put in a business that actually makes money." The man left, slamming the door. Rosa collapsed in a chair, trembling. "My God, we're ruined. Tomas got sick last winter. Sales dropped. We fell behind on rent. I thought we could recover, but—" Bridget looked at the envelope she kept in her room. $500. It wasn't enough for the $5,000 Rosa owed, but it was a start. "What if we could get the money?" she asked slowly. "How? We have nothing to sell, no rich relatives." "I have something," Bridget said, "and I know someone who might help us with the rest." That night, she wrote a letter. She drafted and redrafted it 20 times before being satisfied. Finally, it said simply, "Nathaniel, you asked me to use your generosity to do good. I know a family that desperately needs help. It's not for me, but for those who saved me when I needed it most. If you still want to help, this is my request. Bridget." She sent the letter through Attorney Whitmore. 3 days later, the response arrived. A check for $5,000 and a note. "For the family that had the wisdom to care for you, and something for you too, though I know you'll protest. Using my money to help others makes me feel less useless in this cage. Always yours, N." There was a second check. $1,000 in Bridget O'Sullivan's name. When she showed the checks to Rosa and Tomas, the couple cried with relief and gratitude. Mr. Castellano received his money, grumbling that some people have all the luck. With the bakery saved and the future temporarily secured, Bridget saved her $1,000 for the baby growing in her womb. Each day brought the birth closer. Each day she thought about what it would be like to raise a child who carried the blood of two worlds that would never meet. But fate hadn't finished playing its cards. At the end of August, while Bridget walked through the market buying supplies, she heard animated conversations about a social scandal shaking high society. Did you hear? Victoria Ashford was discovered in a compromising situation with the family's riding instructor. The instructor? What shame! They say her husband found her in the stable. Nathaniel Ashford requested annulment immediately. The Pembertons are furious, but they can't do anything. She was caught in flagrant adultery. Bridget stopped, processing the information. Nathaniel's marriage had lasted less than 3 months. Victoria had betrayed him. He was free. But what did that mean for her? Nothing had really changed. She was still a pregnant Irish maid. He was still one of the richest men in New York. The abyss between them remained unbridgeable. Or maybe not. That night, Bridget made a decision. She couldn't keep hiding. Nathaniel deserved to know the truth about his child. He deserved the chance to choose what kind of man he wanted to be. One who followed the rules of a corrupt society, or one who followed the dictates of his heart. She wrote another letter, the hardest of her life. Nathaniel, there's something you need to know. Something that will change everything or change nothing, but that I can no longer hide. When we were separated, I carried with me more than memories. In 2 months, you will welcome a son or daughter into this world. I'm not writing to ask you for anything. All I want is for you to know they exist, that they were created from love, and that whatever your decision about your future, this child will know they were loved from the first moment. If you don't wish to be involved, I'll understand. If you wish to be part of their life, we'll find a way. The choice is yours, always yours, Bridget. She sent the letter and waited. The response came the next day. It wasn't a letter. It was the man himself. Nathaniel Ashford appeared at the door of Martinez Bakery like an apparition from another world. Impeccably dressed even in the chaos of the Lower East Side, he stood out like a diamond in coal. Bridget came out from behind the counter, trembling. They hadn't seen each other in 4 months, but it seemed like years. "Is it true?" he asked without preamble, voice breaking. "Are we expecting a child?" She nodded, unable to speak. Nathaniel crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and embraced her with an intensity that left her breathless. "Thank God," he murmured against her hair. "Thank God you told me. Thank God I found you again. Nathaniel, I don't expect—" "Marry me," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "Right now. Today. I don't care what society says. I don't care what my family thinks. I love you. I love our child. And I won't spend 1 more day living a lie when the truth is here, with you. It will be a terrible scandal. You'll become a social pariah. So be it. I've lived 35 years following rules I didn't write, fulfilling expectations that were never mine. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I want. A life with you. A family built on real love, not on contracts and conveniences. Your mother will never allow it. My mother has no vote in this. I'm an adult man with my own fortune, and I'll use every penny of it to protect you, to protect our child, and to build a life where love matters more than lineage." Bridget wanted to believe it. She wanted to surrender to the temptation of that impossible future, but she knew the power of high society to destroy those who defied its norms. "Give me time," she whispered, "to think, to be sure you're making this decision for the right reasons and not just out of noble obligation." "It's not obligation," he insisted. "It's choice. The first true choice I've made in my life." "Then prove it to me. Return to your world for a week. Face the consequences of Victoria's scandal. Reflect on what it really means to defy your entire social class. If at the end of the week you still feel the same, then we'll talk about futures." Nathaniel didn't want to leave, but he respected her request. Before departing, he took her hand and kissed it reverently. "1 week," he promised. "But I warn you now, there's nothing that can change how I feel. I'll see you in 7 days, my love, and then we'll begin our life together." When he left, Rosa emerged from the storeroom where she had witnessed the entire scene. "That man truly loves you," she said in a soft voice. "I know, but love isn't always enough. Sometimes it's the only thing that matters." The following week was one of the longest of Bridget's life. Meanwhile, Nathaniel faced the storm unleashed by the annulment of his marriage. Eleanor Ashford was furious. The Irish girl. It all comes back to that damned Maid. Are you going to ruin the Ashford name for an adventure with the help? It's not an adventure, Mother. It's love, and she's going to be the mother of your grandchild. The silence that followed was glacial. A bastard, Eleanor said finally. You'll bring a bastard into this family. They won't be a bastard if we marry, and that's exactly what I plan to do. I'll disinherit you. I'll cut you off without a penny. I have my own fortune, independent of the family trust. And frankly, Mother, I'd rather live honestly in poverty than in opulence based on hypocrisy. The family war had begun, and it would only get worse before it got better. The 7 days passed slowly. Bridget worked in the bakery, feeling how her child grew inside her with each passing day. The soft movements became stronger, as if the baby knew their world was about to transform radically. Rosa watched her with maternal concern. What will you decide if he returns? I don't know, Bridget admitted. My heart says yes, but my head reminds me of all the obstacles. How do we raise a child between two worlds that hate each other? What kind of life will a child born of love but rejected by half their heritage have? Love finds a way, Rosa said with her simple wisdom. Trust in that. On the 8th day, Nathaniel appeared, but he didn't come alone. Behind him came an unexpected entourage. James Whitmore, the attorney, Reverend Thomas Mitchell from St. Patrick's Episcopal Church, and to Bridget's absolute astonishment, 2 distinguished-looking women she recognized from social photographs in the newspapers. Bridget, Nathaniel said, taking her hand, I want to introduce you to some people. This is Caroline Astor, niece of Mrs. Astor and Margaret Vanderbilt, their friends and allies. The 2 women examined Bridget with frank but not hostile curiosity. Nathaniel has told us your story, Caroline said in a soft voice, and he has convinced us that the real scandal isn't his love for you, but the system that makes love a crime when it crosses class lines. We are women of influence, Margaret added, and we've decided to use that influence to support your marriage. It won't be easy. There will be rejection and criticism, but you won't be alone. Bridget looked at Nathaniel, astonished. What did you do? I spent the week building alliances, he explained. I spoke with every friend who ever owed me a favor. I reminded society that true value is in character, not in surname. And I found more support than I expected. It turns out many in our class are tired of living empty lives dictated by absurd conventions. But your mother, my mother will eventually accept it or not. That's her choice. Mine is already made. Reverend Mitchell stepped forward. Miss O'Sullivan, Mr. Ashford has asked me to officiate a private ceremony this afternoon, if you accept. I've brought the marriage documents. Everything is legal and legitimate. Bridget looked at Nathaniel, searching his eyes for any trace of doubt or regret. She found only absolute love and unwavering determination. Are you completely sure? She asked one last time. Once we cross this threshold, there's no going back. I don't want to go back, he responded firmly. I only want to move forward with you. Rosa appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron and with tears in her eyes. Girl, if you don't say yes right now, I'll push you to the altar myself. And so, in the small living room above Martinez Bakery, with the smell of freshly baked bread floating in the air, Bridget O'Sullivan married Nathaniel Ashford. Caroline and Margaret served as witnesses. Rosa cried with joy. Tomás opened a bottle of Spanish wine saved for special occasions. The ceremony was simple, but deeply moving. When Nathaniel placed the ring on her finger, Bridget felt the world realign. When they kissed as husband and wife, she knew they had unleashed a storm that would shake the very foundations of New York society. But for that moment, nothing else mattered. The storm came quickly. The newspapers exploded with the news. Shipping magnate marries pregnant Irish maid. The headlines screamed. Political cartoons depicted them cruelly. Social columnists speculated about temporary insanity, Irish spells, and the moral decay of privileged youth. Eleanor Ashford fulfilled her threat. She publicly disinherited Nathaniel, announcing in the newspapers that her son had brought irreparable shame to the family name. Invitations to social events dried up. Former friends crossed the street to avoid greeting them. But not everyone reacted with hostility. The case captured the popular imagination. In immigrant neighborhoods, Bridget became a symbol that American dreams weren't reserved only for the rich. Servant girls looked at her with hope. Immigrant mothers blessed her. Caroline Astor and Margaret Vanderbilt kept their word. They organized a tea in honor of the new Mrs. Ashford, forcing other society women to attend or openly admit their prejudice. It was a tense and uncomfortable afternoon, but it established a crucial precedent. "What you're doing is revolutionary," Caroline confided to Bridget during the tea. "You're challenging centuries of tradition. There will be resistance, but every time you appear together in public with dignity, you weaken the system a little more." Nathaniel bought an elegant but not ostentatious house on 72nd Street, far from Fifth Avenue and its scornful stairs. Bridget decorated it with simple taste, mixing the best of both worlds, fine art alongside Irish crafts, English porcelain alongside pottery from immigrant villages. They created a home that reflected their love, authentic, unpretentious, welcoming. The months of pregnancy passed in this new normality. Nathaniel treated her as if she were made of crystal, worrying about every little discomfort. Bridget laughed at his overprotectiveness, but secretly adored it. "I never thought I'd see the great Nathaniel Ashford reading books about baby care," Rosa joked during her frequent visits. "I'll be the best father this child could have," Nathaniel declared seriously. "I won't make the mistakes of my family. Our child will grow up knowing they're loved unconditionally, no matter what the world says." But the world had different plans. Victoria Pemberton, now completely discredited socially after her scandal, had developed poisonous bitterness. In her distorted mind, Bridget was responsible for her downfall. If it hadn't been for the Irish Maid, Nathaniel would never have requested the annulment so quickly. Victoria would have had time to repair her reputation, to explain, to lie. She began a whispered campaign of destruction. She spread vicious rumors that Bridget had been a prostitute in Ireland, that the baby wasn't Nathaniel's but from some secret lover, that she had used Celtic witchcraft to seduce the poor, confused man. The rumors found receptive ears among those who already despised the marriage for class reasons. They amplified, mutated, grew into a monster of lies. Nathaniel tried to stop them by threatening defamation lawsuits, but it was like trying to dam the ocean with bare hands. For every rumor he denied, 3 new ones emerged. "Ignore them," Attorney Whitmore advised. "The more attention you give them, the more power they have. Live your lives honestly. Truth will eventually prevail." But the pressure was beginning to affect Bridget. The stress of pregnancy, combined with constant public scrutiny, was exhausting her. Some days she could barely get out of bed. The doctor recommended complete rest. "Mrs. Ashford, your blood pressure is dangerously high. If you don't take care of yourself, you'll risk both your life and the baby's." Nathaniel installed her in their bedroom, with strict orders to do nothing except rest. He hired nurses, cancelled all social commitments, and spent every free moment at her side, reading her poetry, or simply holding her hand. "This is my fault," Bridget lamented. "I've dragged you into a terrible scandal. You've lost your family, your social position, your peace. And I've gained the love of my life and a child on the way," he interrupted firmly. "Bridget, listen to me. I wouldn't change a single moment of this. I prefer 1,000 times to face scandals with you than to live respectably without you." But then Victoria played her cruelest card. She bribed one of New York's most sensationalist reporters to publish a devastating article. The headline read, "Magnate Deceived, Irish Maid Hides Dark Past." The article claimed, with completely fabricated but convincing details, that Bridget had been arrested in Ireland for theft before emigrating, that she had had multiple lovers on the ship during the crossing, and that the pregnancy could be anyone's. The article included anonymous testimonies from supposed witnesses and forged documents that looked official. The morning it was published, Nathaniel was furious beyond words. "This is criminal defamation. I'll sue the newspaper, Victoria, every damn person involved." "It doesn't matter," Bridget whispered, pale as death, as she read the lies printed about her. "Even if you win, people will believe that where there's smoke, there's fire. My reputation is destroyed. And the worst part is this will affect our child. Then we'll leave," Nathaniel decided suddenly. "To Europe, to California, anywhere we can start fresh without this poison following us. Run away. It's not running away. It's choosing the battlefield. Here we're surrounded by enemies. Somewhere else we can build something new." But before they could plan anything, fate intervened again. Bridget went into premature labor 2 weeks earlier than expected. The nurses panicked. The doctor came running. Nathaniel stayed at her side, holding her while she screamed in pain. The birth was long and complicated. Bridget lost a lot of blood. The baby was in a difficult position. For hours, the outcome remained uncertain. In the waiting room, Rosa prayed the rosary. Caroline and Margaret had come, defying the scandal, to offer support. Even some of the loyal servants from the old Ashford mansion appeared, wanting to show their solidarity. Finally, near dawn, a baby's cry was heard. Nathaniel emerged from the room with tears running down his face. "A daughter," he announced with a voice broken by emotion. "We have a perfect and beautiful daughter, and Bridget is strong. She's exhausted but well." The waiting room erupted in celebration. They named the baby Grace Eleanor Ashford. Grace for the grace of God that had brought them through so many storms. Eleanor as a gesture of reconciliation toward the grandmother who had not yet met her granddaughter. When Bridget held her daughter for the first time, all the pain, all the scandal, all the difficulties faded away. This small creature with wisps of dark hair and eyes that promised to be green like her mother's was the embodiment of love that had defied the world. "Look at her," Nathaniel whispered, marveling. "She's perfect. She's ours. She's more than ours," Bridget said softly. "She's proof that love can triumph over any obstacle. She's hope in the form of a baby." The news of the birth reached the newspapers, but this time the tone changed. There was something about the image of a wealthy father holding his newborn daughter with absolute devotion that touched hearts. The circulating photographs showed Nathaniel looking at Grace as if she were the most precious treasure in the universe, defying anyone to question the legitimacy of his family. Even some of the harshest critics began to soften. A family that had faced such adversity together, that had chosen love over convenience, was beginning to seem more admirable than scandalous. And then came the unexpected visitor. A week after the birth, while Bridget rested with Grace in her arms, the bedroom door opened. Eleanor Ashford entered, dressed severely in black, with a face as rigid as always. Bridget tensed, instinctively protecting her daughter. "Mrs. Ashford," Eleanor said formally. She paused, clearly struggling with something internally. "I've come to meet my granddaughter." Nathaniel, who had been by the window, approached protectively. "Mother, if you've come to cause more pain—" "I've come," Eleanor interrupted with a trembling voice, "to ask for forgiveness." The silence that followed was absolute. Eleanor slowly approached the bed, looking at the baby sleeping peacefully. Her severe face softened in ways Nathaniel had never seen. "She looks like you when you were born," she murmured. "The same nose, the same small mouth." She looked up at Bridget. "I have been terrible to you. I let pride and fear of what society would think cloud my judgment. I saw threat where I should have seen love. I saw scandal where I should have seen courage." "What changed?" Nathaniel asked cautiously. "I saw the photographs in the newspapers. I saw how you looked at your daughter, and I realized something. My own husband never looked at me that way. My parents arranged our marriage for convenience. I spent 50 years in a respectable but loveless marriage. And here you are, my son, with a wife you chose for love, a daughter born of that love, and I treated you as if you were the criminal." Tears now ran down Eleanor's cheeks, something so shocking that Nathaniel could barely process what he was seeing. "You, Miss O'Sullivan. Forgive me, Mrs. Ashford. You have taught me something that society tried to take from me decades ago, that true love is worth more than 1,000 convenient marriages. That dignity doesn't come from surname but from character, and that I've been an arrogant fool." She removed a ring from her finger, a beautiful sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "This ring belonged to my grandmother. She also defied conventions in her time, marrying a man her family considered inferior. She gave it to me before she died, and made me promise I would only pass it on to someone who understood the true value of love. I want you to have it, Bridget." Bridget took the ring with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the gesture. May I hold my granddaughter?" Eleanor asked timidly. Bridget looked at Nathaniel, who nodded. Gently, she placed Grace in her grandmother's arms. Eleanor looked at the baby with an expression of absolute tenderness. "Welcome to the world, Grace Eleanor. You have extraordinary parents who love you more than I was ever loved. Learn from them. And forgive your grandmother for being so blind for so long. The reconciliation wasn't instantaneous or complete. Years of pride and pain don't erase with one conversation, but it was a beginning." Eleanor began visiting regularly, bringing gifts for Grace, offering grandmotherly advice, and slowly rebuilding her relationship with her son. More importantly, her public acceptance of the marriage opened doors that had been closed. If Eleanor Ashford, the feared matriarch of one of New York's oldest families, accepted Bridget, then who was anyone else to reject her? Society, always following its leaders, began to soften its stance. But Victoria Pemberton wasn't finished. Consumed by jealousy and bitterness, she made a desperate decision. If she couldn't ruin Bridget's reputation with lies, she would ruin her with violence. She hired a man of dubious reputation, an Irishman expelled from several jobs for violent conduct. She paid him generously to frighten Bridget, to make her feel unsafe, vulnerable, psychologically destroyed. The man, Patrick O'Malley, took the money, but had his own plans. One afternoon when Bridget was walking in the park with Grace in her stroller, accompanied only by a young nanny, O'Malley approached her. "Mrs. Ashford," he said with a marked Irish accent, "I have a message for you." Bridget tensed immediately, positioning herself protectively in front of the stroller. "Miss Pemberton paid me to frighten you," O'Malley continued. "But you see, I'm Irish like you. I know what it's like to be treated like trash by the rich, and I'm not going to hurt one of my own, no matter how much money they offer me." He took an envelope from his jacket. "This contains letters between Victoria Pemberton and the reporter who published those lies about you. Evidence of their conspiracy. I thought you'd want to have it." Bridget took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you gave hope to girls like my sister, who serve in big houses, dreaming of something better. Because you proved they don't have to stay in their assigned place. Because you're one of us who made it without selling out." He paused. "And because Miss Pemberton is a viper who deserves to be exposed." O'Malley left before Bridget could thank him properly. That night, Bridget and Nathaniel reviewed the letters. They were devastating. Victoria had orchestrated everything, the lies, the forged documents, the fabricated testimonies. It was all there in her own handwriting. "With this, we can destroy her," Nathaniel said with grim satisfaction. "We can take her to court, ruin her completely." Bridget reflected at length. It would be so easy to take revenge. Victoria deserved all the punishment she could receive, but then she looked at Grace sleeping in her crib, innocent and beautiful. "No," she said finally. "We won't destroy her." "What?" "Bridget, she tried to ruin you, and she failed. Nathaniel, look at us. We're together. We have a beautiful daughter. Your mother has reconciled with us. Society is beginning to accept us. Victoria has already lost everything that mattered. Reputation, family, future. Destroying her further would only lower us to her level. So what do we do with this evidence?" We keep it, as insurance. If she ever tries to hurt us again, we'll use it. But for now, we let her live with the consequences of her own actions. That's a sweeter justice than any revenge we could inflict." Nathaniel looked at his wife with renewed amazement. "You're extraordinary. Many in your position would seek bloody revenge. I don't want our daughter to grow up surrounded by revenge and bitterness. I want her to grow up knowing that mercy is stronger than hatred, that love triumphs over resentment." If you're enjoying this story so far, hit the like button. It means a lot to us and helps us keep sharing stories that touch the heart. The following 2 years were of gradual but profound transformation. The Ashford O'Sullivan family became a symbol of social change in New York. It wasn't easy or quick, but it was real. Nathaniel used his fortune to establish immigrant aid programs. He opened schools where Irish, Italian, Jewish children, and those of all nationalities, could receive quality education without discrimination. He created an interest-free loan fund to help new immigrants establish businesses. Bridget became an advocate for domestic workers' rights. She organized meetings where maids could report abuse without fear of retaliation. She pressured for minimum standards of wages and working conditions to be established. She wrote articles in progressive newspapers about the dignity of domestic work. Together, they formed a formidable team that challenged the status quo at every opportunity. Grace grew surrounded by love from both worlds. Her Ashford grandparents adored her. Rosa and Tomas were her honorary aunt and uncle, who filled her with sweets from the bakery. She played with rich children at elegant parties and with immigrant children in public parks. She was a child who naturally didn't see differences where others saw unbridgeable divides. "Mummy, why does Mrs. Whitmore say we're different?" Grace asked one day with her 3 years of age and brutal innocence. Bridget knelt to her level. "Sweetheart, some people believe certain families are better than others just because they have more money or older surnames. But you know the truth. People are worth what they do, not where they come from. Like you, Mommy. You're from Ireland, but you're the best." Bridget hugged her daughter, tears in her eyes. This child was the future she and Nathaniel were building, a future where human value surpassed class prejudices. But the past is never completely buried. Victoria Pemberton had spent 2 years in self-imposed seclusion, consumed by alcohol and resentment. Her family had repudiated her. She had no friends, no future, nothing except her hatred toward Bridget. One October night, intoxicated and desperate, she made a fatal decision. If she couldn't have happiness, no one would, especially not the woman who had stolen her life. She waited until late, when she knew Nathaniel was at a business meeting and only Bridget and Grace would be home with some servants. She snuck through the back garden with an oil lamp and matches. She was going to burn the house. She was going to destroy everything Bridget loved, as Bridget had destroyed everything of hers. But fate has strange ways of intervening. Patrick O'Malley, the Irishman who had helped Bridget 2 years earlier, had maintained discreet surveillance over the family, out of loyalty. That night he saw Victoria sneaking onto the property. Recognizing the immediate danger, he ran to the front door and knocked urgently. "Mrs. Ashford, Victoria Pemberton is in the back garden with a lamp. She's going to set the house on fire." Bridget reacted instantly. She shouted to the servants to evacuate. She grabbed Grace. She sent someone to get the police. As they ran out the front door, with her suitcase in hand and broken heart, they saw smoke beginning to rise from the back of the house. Victoria had set fire to the stables. The flames spread quickly toward the main house, fed by the autumn wind. Bridget saw Victoria standing in the garden, watching her work with an expression of demented satisfaction. For a moment, their gazes met across the smoke and distance. "Why?" Bridget shouted. "Why so much hatred? Because you took everything from me," Victoria howled. "My husband, my reputation, my life. I didn't take anything from you. You destroyed your own marriage with your infidelity." But Victoria was beyond reason. She lit another section, laughing hysterically as the flames grew. The firefighters arrived, followed closely by the police and Nathaniel, who had been alerted to the emergency. Nathaniel ran directly to his wife and daughter, embracing them fiercely. "Thank God you're safe. When I heard, 'We're fine,' Bridget reassured him, but Victoria had become trapped. In her state of intoxication and madness, she hadn't calculated the wind direction well. The flames she had started now surrounded her, cutting off her escape. Without thinking, Patrick O'Malley ran into the fire. He crossed through the flames, grabbed Victoria, and dragged her to safe ground, burning himself severely in the process. The police arrested Victoria immediately. She was charged with attempted murder and premeditated arson. Patrick was taken to the hospital with severe burns. Bridget and Nathaniel visited him daily, ensuring he received the best medical care available. "You saved the life of the woman who wanted to kill us," Bridget said softly. "Why?" Patrick, bandaged and in pain, smiled weakly. "Because letting someone die, even someone bad, would make me a monster. And because you taught me that you always have to choose mercy over revenge." Victoria's trial was sensational. The newspapers covered every detail. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple witnesses, evident physical damage, confession at the moment of her arrest. But when it came time for Bridget to testify, she did something unexpected. "Your Honor," she said from the stand, "Victoria Pemberton committed a terrible crime. She endangered my daughter, my family, innocence. She deserves to be punished for that." She paused. "But she's also a woman who has lost everything: dignity, family, future. She's been consumed by bitterness until becoming a shadow of herself. The severest punishment would be to let her rot in prison for decades. But I ask for mercy." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. "I ask that Victoria receive treatment for her alcoholism and her clear mental instability. I ask that after serving a reasonable time in prison, she be given the opportunity for rehabilitation, to rebuild her life in some way. Because if we don't believe in the possibility of redemption, then what hope is there for any of us?" The judge, clearly impressed by the victim's clemency, sentenced Victoria to 5 years in prison, followed by mandatory treatment in a mental institution. The newspapers hailed Bridget as a model of Christian grace. Even those who had been her harshest critics recognized her extraordinary capacity to forgive. After the trial, as Bridget and Nathaniel walked back to their carriage, he stopped her. "We could have destroyed her completely. We had all the cards to play." "I know," Bridget said, "but Grace was watching us. What lesson would we have taught her? That we respond to hatred with more hatred? I'd rather she grow up seeing that justice can be mixed with mercy." Nathaniel kissed her forehead reverently. "Every day you make me want to be a better man." The house was repaired. They improved the stables and installed modern fire safety systems. Patrick O'Malley recovered, though he was left with permanent scars. Nathaniel offered him a job managing one of his warehouses, a position Patrick accepted gratefully. Eleanor Ashford had grown increasingly close to her daughter-in-law. One afternoon, while having tea and watching Grace play in the garden, she confessed something surprising. "You know, I've been thinking about establishing a charitable fund to help young immigrants who want to study but don't have the means. I'll call it the Grace Eleanor Fund, in honor of my granddaughter who taught me it's never too late to change." Bridget took her mother-in-law's hand. "That would be wonderful, and it would truly honor her name. I've also decided to rewrite my will. A significant part of my estate will go to that fund. Another part will be for Grace, and I want you and Nathaniel to know you have my complete blessing. You always have. I was just too stubborn to admit it." "Eleanor," Bridget said softly, using her name for the first time without the Mrs. "Thank you for giving us a chance, for choosing love over pride. You taught me that, dear. You and my stubborn son who had more wisdom in his heart than I had in my entire life." Life continued its rhythm. Nathaniel expanded his businesses, but now with a focus on ethical practices and fair wages. He earned a reputation as a progressive businessman, sometimes ridiculed by other magnates but admired by his workers. Bridget published her first book, From Ireland with Hope, a collection of stories about Irish immigrants who had found new lives in America. The book became an unexpected success, selling thousands of copies and giving voice to those who were rarely heard. Grace started school at a progressive institution that mixed children from different backgrounds. She excelled in her studies, showing her mother's sharp intelligence and her father's determination. One night, while putting Grace to bed, the child asked, "Mommy, when I grow up, can I help people like you help? You can be whatever you want to be, my love, and helping others is always the noblest choice. Then I'll be like you, someone who makes the world less bad for sad people." Bridget hugged her daughter, her heart overflowing with love and pride. This child, born of a love that defied all conventions, was becoming exactly what the world needed. Someone who saw beyond differences, who chose compassion over prejudice. But there was still one last test to face. Nathaniel's family, beyond his mother, had remained distant. Uncles, cousins, an entire network of Ashfords who disapproved of the marriage. They organized family events to which Nathaniel and Bridget were never invited. They created tension at social gatherings. They maintained social ostracism as much as they could. The catalyst for final change came unexpectedly. Nathaniel's uncle, Robert Ashford, suffered a massive stroke. He was dying, and in his final days asked to see his nephew. Nathaniel went, taking Bridget with him despite the objections of other family members. Robert, paralyzed and barely able to speak, looked at Bridget with eyes showing regret. "I was foolish," he whispered with difficulty. "I saw prejudice where I should have seen love." He paused, struggling to breathe. "Forgive, both of you. You're forgiven," Bridget said softly. "Rest in peace, Mr. Ashford." Robert died that night, but his final confession touched something in the other family members. At his funeral, several cousins approached Nathaniel and Bridget, offering timid apologies and invitations to reconnect. Not everyone was ready to fully accept, but the cracks in the family wall were beginning to appear. And then, in the spring of 1908, came the news that would change everything definitively. Eleanor Ashford organized a spring ball, the first in 5 years. But this ball would be different. It would celebrate Grace's 5th birthday and serve as a final public declaration of family acceptance. "We'll invite everyone," Eleanor declared, "old families and new, the rich and those building their fortunes, and anyone who rejects the invitation due to prejudice will be excluded from my circle permanently." It was a social ultimatum. Eleanor Ashford was using all her power and influence to force acceptance of her daughter-in-law. The night of the ball arrived. The Ashford mansion, because Eleanor had insisted on hosting it there, in the house where Bridget had been a maid, was transformed into a fairy tale palace. Bridget descended the grand staircase on Nathaniel's arm, dressed in a magnificent emerald green dress that complemented her eyes, not as a maid this time, but as the lady of the house, as a mother, as a recognized author, as a respected philanthropist. Grace danced among the guests in her white dress, charming everyone with her vibrant personality. Caroline Astor approached Bridget. "Do you remember 5 years ago when few believed this marriage would survive? Today, everyone in this hall recognizes you had more courage than any of us." The orchestra played a waltz. Nathaniel offered his hand to Bridget. "Will you grant me this dance, Mrs. Ashford?" "Always, Mr. Ashford." As they danced, Bridget remembered that night in the garden 5 years ago, when Nathaniel had taught her to dance under the stars, when everything seemed impossible. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "About how far we've come, about all the battles we fought, about how love really did conquer everything." "It wasn't just love," Nathaniel corrected. "It was your courage, your refusal to let the world define you by your origin, your insistence that human dignity matters more than lineage. It was our courage," she said, "both of us together." The music changed. Eleanor approached, asking to dance with her son. As Nathaniel danced with his mother, Rosa appeared at Bridget's side. "Look at all this," Rosa said with tears in her eyes. "The girl who came to my bakery, desperate and pregnant, is now admired by high society. It's a miracle." "Not a miracle," Bridget responded. "Hard work, unwavering love, and people like you who believed in me when no one else did. Do you remember when I told you love always finds a way?" "I remember. You were right." Grace ran toward them with flushed cheeks from dancing. "Mommy! Grandma Eleanor says I can open my presents now." Bridget looked around the hall. She saw faces that had rejected her now smiling. She saw her husband dancing with his reconciled mother. She saw her beloved daughter innocent of the prejudices that had almost destroyed them. She had won. She hadn't just survived, she had triumphed. Not by crushing her enemies, but by transforming them with persistent love and unwavering dignity. This was her victory, a victory that would change New York, that would inspire generations, that would prove walls between classes could be torn down when love was strong enough. The following years were of consolidation and expansion. The Ashford-O'Sullivan marriage became an institution in itself, a model of what was possible when love transcended artificial barriers. Nathaniel and Bridget established the Ashford Foundation for Immigrant Education. They built schools in 5 states, offering free quality education for children from immigrant families. The programs included not only traditional academics, but also vocational training, English instruction, and citizenship guidance. Thousands of children who otherwise would have remained in poverty found their path to better lives. Many became doctors, lawyers, teachers, entrepreneurs. They carried with them the fundamental lesson: origin doesn't determine destiny. Bridget wrote 3 more books, each exploring different aspects of the immigrant experience in America. Her works were translated into multiple languages and studied in universities. She received invitations to speak at prestigious institutions, always using her platform to advocate for the voiceless. She became a recognizable public figure, walking the fine line between her humble past and her privileged present. She never forgot where she came from. She regularly visited the Lower East Side, sitting with immigrant women in their small kitchens, listening to their stories, offering practical help. "Don't let them convince you that you've arrived," Rosa advised her during one of these visits. "The day you forget who you are is the day you lose your real power." Bridget never forgot. Grace grew in this environment of service and purpose. At 10 years old, she already accompanied her parents on visits to the Foundation's schools. At 14, she had begun her own project, a mentoring program where young people from wealthy families were paired with young immigrants to break down class barriers from an early age. "If we grow up together," Grace explained with wisdom beyond her years, "we don't develop the prejudices that divide our parents." She was an extraordinary child who embodied the best of both worlds. She had the refined education of the upper class, combined with genuine empathy forged in understanding struggle. She was bilingual, played piano like her father, wrote like her mother, and possessed an innate sense of social justice that drove her. "Our daughter will change the world," Nathaniel predicted one night, watching Grace rehearse a speech to present at her school about equal rights for workers. "She's already doing it," Bridget responded, "one young heart at a time." The family also grew. After Grace came 2 more children, Thomas, named for Thomas the baker, and Margaret in honor of Margaret Vanderbilt, who had been a crucial ally. Each child was raised with the same values: hard work, compassion, and the understanding that privilege comes with responsibility. The Ashford Mansion became a gathering place for progressive thinkers. Labor reforms, women's rights, universal education were discussed there. Nathaniel used his influence to push for legislation protecting workers and children. Bridget mobilized women from all classes to demand women's suffrage. They didn't always win. Many of their battles were lost or took decades to materialize, but they planted seeds that would eventually flourish. Eleanor Ashford, in her final years, became an open advocate for social reforms. She used her position as Grand Dame of society to shame other wealthy people into contributing to charitable causes. She established minimum standards for treatment of domestic servants that other families eventually adopted. "It's never too late to do the right thing," she frequently said. "I spent the first part of my life defending an unjust system. I'll spend the second part trying to dismantle it." When Eleanor passed away at 82, she left her fortune divided between her grandchildren and the Ashford Foundation. Her funeral was attended not only by the social elite, but by hundreds of domestic workers who had benefited from the reforms she had championed. "She died as she lived her final years," Bridget said in the eulogy, "proving that redemption is possible for anyone willing to face their mistakes and change." Victoria Pemberton left prison after 5 years, a transformed woman. Treatment had worked. She had faced her demons, overcome her alcoholism, and found some measure of peace. She approached Bridget with timid humility, asking for forgiveness in person. "I don't expect you to forgive me completely," Victoria said, very different from the bitter woman who had tried to burn down her house. "I just want you to know I'm sorry. I was sick, consumed by jealousy and alcohol, but that doesn't excuse what I did. I endangered your daughter. That's unforgivable. I forgave you years ago," Bridget responded. "The question is, have you forgiven yourself?" Victoria smiled sadly. "I'm working on it. I've begun working with women struggling with alcoholism. If I can use my terrible story as a warning to others, maybe I can find some purpose in all this pain." "Then you're on the right path," Bridget said. "We all deserve second chances, even third and fourth ones." Victoria eventually became a respected activist in the temperance movement, not from a place of moral judgment, but from personal experience. Her testimony saved many lives. Years later, on her deathbed, Victoria asked to see Bridget one last time. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing humanity in me when I had lost all my humanity, for giving me a chance for redemption when I deserved only punishment." "We're all more than our worst moments," Bridget responded. "Rest in peace, Victoria." Nathaniel's businesses prospered precisely because he treated his employees well. While other magnates faced strikes and protests, Ashford workers were the most loyal in the industry. He paid fair wages, maintained safe conditions, and established one of the first pension programs for employees. "Critics say I'm too soft," Nathaniel commented during an anniversary dinner, "but the numbers don't lie. Happy workers are productive workers. Ethics and profitability aren't mutually exclusive." "You're proving capitalism doesn't have to be ruthless," Bridget observed, "that it's possible to succeed in business without exploiting the vulnerable." "I learned that from you. You taught me that every person has inherent dignity that must be respected." In 1908, 20 years after Bridget arrived in New York, they organized a grand celebration. It wasn't a wedding anniversary or birthday. It was a celebration of everything they had built together. They invited everyone: old friends from high society, immigrant families they had helped, graduates of their educational programs, former employees, progressive political figures. It was an extraordinary mix of people who normally would never share the same space, but they all had something in common. They had been touched in some way by the love that Bridget and Nathaniel had defended against all odds. During dinner, Grace, now a young woman of 25, studying law at university, gave a speech. "My parents taught me that love isn't passive," she said, looking at Bridget and Nathaniel with shining eyes. "Real love requires courage. It requires being willing to be ridiculed, rejected, ostracized. It requires defending principles when it's easier to give up." They demonstrated that an ordinary person, if they have enough love and determination, can change the world. She paused, voice emotional. "Many here tonight are products of that change, students who received education their parents could never dream of, workers who earn fair wages and have job security, women who found voice in my mother's writings. Families who were saved from desperation by my father's generosity. She looked around the hall. But the most important thing my parents demonstrated is this: love knows no borders of class, nationality, or circumstance. Love sees the human soul in all its beauty, regardless of the outer packaging. And when love combines with action, when feeling transforms into active commitment to justice, then it becomes a force that can move mountains. The applause was deafening. That night, as Bridget and Nathaniel prepared for bed, he embraced her from behind as she looked at herself in the mirror. "What do you see?" he asked softly. Bridget studied her reflection. She was no longer the 23-year-old girl who had arrived at New York's port with nothing except hope. She was now 53 years old, grey hair mixing with brown, lines around her eyes that told stories of laughter and tears. "I see a woman who survived," she said finally, "a woman who refused to let the world tell her who she could be, a woman who found love in the most unlikely place and defended it against all odds." "I see a hero," Nathaniel said. "The bravest woman I've ever known." "Not a hero," Bridget corrected, "just human. I made mistakes, had doubts, wanted to give up 1,000 times. But you didn't, and that's what matters." She turned in his arms, looking at him directly. "Do you know what's the most extraordinary thing about all this? It's not that I conquered the New York magnate, as the romantic newspapers say. It's that you had the courage to be conquered. To let love transform your life, even when it meant losing everything you had known. I lost a gilded cage and gained a real life," Nathaniel said. "The best trade I'll ever make." They kissed, still deeply in love after 20 years, after all the storms, after all the battles. The next day, Bridget visited Martinez Bakery, now run by Rosa and Tomas's children, who had passed away years before. The business was thriving, expanding to 3 different locations. She sat at the same table where Rosa had served her soup that first time, when she was pregnant and desperate. "Thank you, Rosa," she whispered to the sky, "for believing in me, for teaching me that kindness exists even in the darkest places." A young man entered the bakery, clearly a recent immigrant from his clothes and his overwhelmed look. He asked for work in broken English. Bridget watched as the owner, remembering his own roots, offered the young man not only work, but also a room. The cycle continued. Kindness generated more kindness. Love inspired more love. This was how the world was changed, one act of mercy at a time. 15 years later, in 1923, Bridget Ashford, now 68 years old, sat in the garden of her Connecticut country house. Nathaniel had passed away 2 years earlier, peacefully in his sleep, holding her hand until the end. She missed him every day, but found comfort knowing they had had more than 35 years together, 35 years of deep love and shared purpose. Grace had followed in their footsteps, becoming a prominent attorney specializing in labor rights. She had won important cases that established precedents for worker protections. She had married a progressive doctor, and they had 3 children who continued the family tradition of service. Thomas managed the Ashford Foundation, expanding it beyond New York throughout the entire country. There were schools in 20 states, programs that had educated more than 100,000 children from immigrant families. Margaret had become a prominent suffragist, fighting tirelessly for women's right to vote that had finally been won 3 years earlier. Now she worked on political campaigns, ensuring women's voices were heard at all levels of government. The 3 children were living testament that love, which had defied social conventions, could create a legacy that transformed generations. Bridget held in her hands a copy of her newly published autobiography, From Service to the Salon, an American story of love and redemption. The book had become an instant success, selling more than 100,000 copies in the first 3 months. But it wasn't the commercial success that mattered to her. It was the letters. She received hundreds each week, from young women who found courage in her story, from immigrants who saw possibility where before they saw only limits. from men who learned that true value is in defending principles over social convenience. One letter in particular had moved her to tears. It was from a young Irish maid in Boston, working in conditions similar to those Bridget had faced 40 years earlier. "Mrs. Ashford," the girl wrote, "your story taught me I don't have to accept the place society assigns me. I'm studying at night, saving every penny. Someday I'll be a teacher, and when I make it, I'll remember it was possible because you showed me the way. Thank you for being brave when brave meant risking everything." These were the victories that really mattered, not the mansions or the fortunes, but the lives transformed by the example that change was possible. Grace arrived to visit her that afternoon, bringing her 3 children. The eldest, Eleanor, was 16 years old and possessed the same fire for justice that had characterized her grandparents. "Grandma," Eleanor said enthusiastically, "at school we're studying the Gilded Age. Our teacher talked about you and Grandpa. She said you were pioneers in tearing down class barriers." Bridget smiled. "Your grandfather and I simply loved each other. The world decided to call it revolution." "But it was revolutionary," Eleanor insisted. "You changed how people think about marriage, about love, about who deserves respect." "Then I hope you also learn this, dear. Every generation has its own battle to fight. We fought against class prejudices. Your mother fights for workers' and women's rights. You'll have your own battles. The question is, will you have the courage to fight them?" "I will," Eleanor promised, with the bright confidence of youth. "You taught me how." After Grace and the children left, Bridget walked through the garden where so many memories lived. She could almost see Nathaniel there, young and in love, teaching her to dance under the stars. She could hear her children's laughter when they were small, running among the flowers. She stopped in front of a simple monument she had erected, a bronze statue of 2 figures holding hands, looking toward the horizon. On the base was engraved, "To the love that defied the world. Nathaniel and Bridget Ashford, 1893 to 1923. We did it, my love," she whispered to the breeze. "We built something that will last longer than us. Not just a family, but a legacy of hope." That night, as she wrote in her journal, she reflected on the extraordinary journey of her life, from the starving fields of Ireland to the halls of power in New York, from despised maid to respected author, from voiceless woman to advocate for thousands. "If I could tell my younger self something," she wrote, "the frightened girl who got off that boat 40 years ago, it would be this. Your origin doesn't determine your destiny. The obstacles you face aren't limits, but opportunities to prove your strength. And love, the true love that demands courage and sacrifice, can move mountains the world says are immovable." She closed the journal and looked out the window at the starry sky. Somewhere up there, she believed, Nathaniel was watching her. And Rosa, and Tomas, and Eleanor, and all those who had been part of this extraordinary journey. They hadn't lived perfect lives. They had made mistakes, faced failures, known deep pain, but they had lived authentic lives, lives guided by love and principle rather than convenience and appearance. And that, Bridget decided as she prepared for sleep, was the only measure of success that really mattered. Her story didn't end with her. It would continue in Grace, in Thomas, in Margaret, in Eleanor, and all her grandchildren. It would continue in every student educated by their foundation, in every worker protected by the laws Nathaniel had helped push through, in every woman inspired by her writings to pursue their own impossible dreams. The love that an Irish maid and a New York magnate had dared to defend had planted seeds that would flourish for generations, and that, more than any fortune or title, was their true legacy. The story of Bridget and Nathaniel reminds us of a fundamental truth that transcends time and place. True love knows no artificial borders. The barriers society builds, the walls prejudice erects, the chains tradition forges, all can be overcome when 2 hearts find the courage to defend what is true over what is convenient. They teach us that social change begins with brave individual decisions, that every act of authentic love challenges an unjust system, and that it's never too late to choose integrity over conformity. Their legacy invites us to examine our own lives. What unnecessary walls have we built? What genuine love have we sacrificed for appearances? The answer determines not only our personal happiness, but the kind of world we leave to future generations. Now I'd love to hear your opinion about this love story that defied all conventions. What part moved you the most? Do you know any similar story of love that triumphed over impossible obstacles? Leave me your comment below telling me what you thought. And don't forget to watch the next video appearing on your screen, where you'll find another passionate story that will touch your heart.